I've lined up just over a year's worth of historical data for the Dow Jones and Bitcoin. And so it traces back to November 3rd, 2020. And there are 270 data points. And that's because that you've got to remember the stock market is not open on weekends and holidays. So for those days, I've removed the Bitcoin data. Now, the initial what I set out to find was, is there a correlation between the stock market and crypto? And then more specifically, I want to find out, when the stock market goes down, does Bitcoin go down with it? And so the correlation is fairly weak. And I think the reason for that is fairly obvious, is that the crypto market is entirely volatile, whereas the stock market is relatively flat. When I looked, I found what I counted was there were 4 days where the stock market dropped more than 2%, and the largest day was actually yesterday, Black Friday, where the stock market dropped 2.53%. And that's what spurred me to look into this. I've thought about it before, but I really wanted to look into it because the stock market dropped, Bitcoin dropped, and then I wanted to see, I anticipate the stock market dropping more, and then I wanted to see, what to expect from the crypto market. So the correlation was initially weak. As I said, I ran the correlation formula in Excel and came up with 0.18. And that's based on Pearson's correlation coefficient. And if you look at that, it's a positive correlation, but it's a fairly weak one, right? So you can't draw too many. It's just there's not a strong correlation between what the stock market does and what Bitcoin will do. So what I did was I simply took out all of the days where the Dow Jones Industrial Average didn't drop more than 0.7%. So stated positively, I looked at only the days where the Dow Jones dropped more than 0.7%. And again, the reason why that's so low is because the stock market has remained fairly flat. We just don't see too many large down days. And so there were 36 of those days. So I brought over the Bitcoin data for those days, and so there is a stronger correlation between the days when the stock market drops and with Bitcoin's price. And so let's go ahead and take a look at that correlation. So it's 0.3 per 6, which is moderate to a fairly strong correlation, or relatively strong correlation. So you can look up the coefficient numbers, but it's not completely, that's not a it's I'm trying to give you a relative measure for that data, but anyways, it's a moderate to relatively strong correlation. So if you think the stock market's going down, then Bitcoin's generally going to go down with it. But just looking at these days individually, you can see that there are days that the stock market fell where Bitcoin didn't. In fact, there's a day where the stock market fell 0.9% and Bitcoin went up nearly 15%. So that's definitely not dispositive, but overall, there are the majority of the days where the stock market does have a significant decline, Bitcoin has a decline along with it. So just reading off some of these, yesterday we saw the Dow drop 2.5%, Bitcoin was down 4.8, and then here's a 0.7 of a drop, Bitcoin was up 2%, another 0.7 of a drop, Bitcoin was down 3%, 0.7 of a drop, Bitcoin was up 6.5%. So just going by that, and those are for the most recent significant drops. You can see it's not always indicative of a Bitcoin drop when the stock market drops, but there is a correlation, and at least based on this limited data that we have from the last year. So from the last year, from 2021, from November 3rd of 2020 all the way to present day 2021, there is a correlation. When the stock market drops, Bitcoin drops, but it doesn't always happen. It doesn't mean it will. In fact, you know, looking at this outlier day, there was a day where the stock market dropped nearly 1%, which is significant for the stock market, and Bitcoin still went up nearly 15%.